going to show you how to make the Helpful Kitty hoop holder from Kreative Kiwi. For this I'm going to be using a 5x7 hoop, thread for the stitching of the kitty, a piece of card just because it's a straight edge, cutaway stabilizer, and I've got my fabrics cut to size. I'm going to show you how to stitch one of the blocks, then you will repeat exactly the same procedure for all of them, because I'm sure you don't want to sit watching the same thing over and over again. So load your chosen file into your machine, and then you're going to hoop your layer of cutaway stabilizer. So place it over the hoop, insert the inner frame, and then we're going to pin around the top edge of the hoop. So take your pin, any pin with a head will do, rest it on the inside of the hoop, push it through, and then bring it back round and back through your stabilizer again, and you're going to do that on all sides. The next thing we're going to do is mark a cross on our stabilizer, and you can use a pen, pencil, anything you want. It doesn't matter because it's not going to be seen afterwards. So take something with a straight edge. I'm using a piece of card just because it's easy to manipulate in a small space. Line it up with the notches on your hoop, so this one here and this one here. And then you're going to draw your line in and do the same on the vertical. I'm going to turn this around so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so that we can now see the center of the hoop, and that's going to allow us to line our fabric up square and central to the hoop, which is important because you're only going to be trimming the blocks down a little bit after they're created. I'm going to set this aside just for a second. Take your fabric and you're going to fold it in half, and then you're just going to cause a little crease with your nail on the edges, and do that in both directions. And I'm going to mark this in a minute so that you can see mine, because you're not going to be able to see it otherwise. Okay, so I'm going to mark these in with my chalk pen. So I've got one there, one there, one there, and one there. So that's my fabric, and I know that which areas I'm going to line up to the cross. So you're going to place your fabric over your cross that you've drawn, and you're going to line up these marks with your cross. Now I understand that this is as broad as my hoop, so the easy answer is just to line it up to the notches there. It really doesn't matter, as long as it's square it's fine. So that's my fabric in position. I'm now going to tape it so that it can't move. Once that's taped, pop your hoop into your machine, and then you're going to stitch the one and only colour for the cat. So that's the block stitched. We can now free this from the hoop, and we can now set this one aside. You need to stitch all your other blocks exactly the same, with the exception of the one that's going to go on your largest piece of fabric. I'm going to show you how to stitch your kitty onto your largest piece of fabric, which is the bit that's going to fold down around your coat hanger. So you're going to prepare your hoop in exactly the same way as you did for your blocks. So mark off your cross. I'm going to put this aside for a second. Then take your fabric, and we're going to work from the bottom edge here. You want to fold your fabric in half lengthways and crease it so that you can see the straight line that you need to line your fabric up in the hoop. Take your quilting ruler, making sure that I get this up the right way. Then you're going to measure down 1.5 inches and you're going to put a dot, and you want that dot on your the crease of your fabric. Then line your ruler up to the crease, and then you're going to mark off 4 inches and at 2 inches as well. So 2 inches is 5 centimeters or 50 millimeters, and 4 inches is 100 millimeters or 10 centimeters. Then working from your center mark here, you're going to put your ruler so that this line here lines up to the crease on your fabric and with the dot that you've made, and then you're going to mark off each side 2 inches as well, or 50 millimeters or 5 centimeters, and that will give you your 5 placement dots. Then you're going to take your hoop, roll all your fabric up so that it's all nicely under control, and then line your dots up to your cross. So I can see this through my fabric, so I'm going to line it up. And then you're going to tape it in place, or you can pin it. Just make sure that you pin right out of the way of the stitch line. It's going to stitch within this area here, so make sure that you put your pin, if you add one, right up the top, and that's going to hold it in place. Double check all your lines. If you hold it up to the light, you'll be able to see. So once you've aligned it, you're going to pop your hoop into your machine and stitch your kitty. And that's the big panel stitched. We're now going to remove this from the hoop. I've removed the tape and pins already. And the way this is going to go, let me take this out. Whoops, my pin's fallen apart. Okay, so there's my piece of long backing fabric, basically, and that will fold over the top like so. Just on this one panel, I'm going to trim around the edge here, just to remove all the excess stabilizer, really, because I think it's going to get in the way once I come to do my edge seams. So, and I'm just going to trim very roughly around the edge of the cat. It doesn't have to be pretty because it's not going to be seen. And that takes care of that. A little bit of water will get rid of my blue dots there. The next job that you've got to do for your square blocks is trim them up to 5.5 inches, and that rounded up is 14 centimeters. So take your quilting ruler or measuring device and then you're going to measure, place it on your marks that you did earlier, or your creases should I say, and then you want the 7 centimeter mark in the middle, so I put that on there and line up with the bottom here, and then I'm going to mark off each side 7 centimeters, which is 2¼ inches, and then you're going to do the same on the other side, and then do your line, and then do exactly the same on the vertical, or should I say the horizontal. So the 7 mark or your 2¼ mark on the lines, and measure off each side. Then once you've got your block marked out to size, you're then going to trim it up with either scissors or a rotary cutter, and that's what I'm going to use. So just line it up with your block and trim off the excess. You're now going to do the same with all your other square blocks. Once you've cut your blocks to size and you've pressed them, we're then going to start adding the sashing to frame the blocks. You're going to be using the 5½ inch by 1½ inch strips of fabric, and you're going to add one on each edge of each block. So turn it over face down, line it up to the very edge of your block, and then pin it in place. Do the same on the edge of the other block. And then this piece, face down over one of the edges. It doesn't matter which one you do, because it's going to be joined to both. And then pin that onto there. Then once these are all stitched on, and you're going to stitch them on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then you will add this one to this one so that it joins the whole lot into one panel. You can prepare all your blocks like this in advance. You don't have to do them one by one and then go to the machine and stitch it. Just prep the whole lot and stitch it all at once. Once you've stitched them together, this is what you will have. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine now and stitch it. Now that our sashing pieces are stitched on, we're going to open this piece up, flip our block over so that the right sides of the fabric are together, line up the edges and pin them in place. And we're now going to stitch this one with a 1/4 inch seam allowance as we did with the others. So we now move on to piecing everything together. The biggest bit of advice I can give you here is label everything. Every part, mark which piece it is and whether it's going to go at the top or the bottom. That way you won't get your pieces mixed up. So I'm going to put the back aside for a minute, and we're going to piece together the 3 pockets for now. So I'm going to start with the bottom one, and I'm going to move these 2 out of the way. So for the bottom pocket, you're going to be putting your 1½ inch strip, or 1½ by 13½ inch strip, face down on the bottom of your kitty blocks, and then you're going to pin it in place. And I'm just putting 3 pins in just to hold it. So that's that in place ready. Then with your 8.5 by 13.5 piece, you're going to place that face down and line it up to the top, and then pin it in place, making sure that you get your edges nice and neat and lined up. So that's your first pocket ready to stitch. We'll put that one aside for a minute. We're now going to do the second pocket, and we're going to do exactly the same. So take your blocks and your 2 pieces of fabric. We'll start off with the bottom one, which is the 7.5 by 13.5 inch. Place it face down and line it up to the bottom edge here, and then pin it in place. I'm just going to pull that down a little bit. And now you're going to do the same with the top. So once again, this is the 13.5 by 14.5. So get it round the right way so that the 13.5 is the width. Face down and line it up against the edge. And that's our second pocket ready for stitching. And we're now going to do exactly the same with the third. So block in the middle, and then you want the 13.5 by 13.5 at the bottom, so lay it face down, edges to edges, and pin it in place. And now you're going to do exactly the same with the top, and the top is the 13.5 by 20.5. So face down, line it up and pin. We're now going to stitch all these pieces in place, and you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the edge, both top and bottom, on each pocket. So I'm starting off with the bottom pocket. I just repinned my pins onto this side of the fabric rather than the other side. It just makes it easier to see stitching from this side. And now for the third pocket. So now that all your blocks are sewn and sashed, we're now going to open them out. Then you're going to fold it in half, and then you're going to press it so that you've got a 1 inch border at the top of your blocks here. And you'll do the same on all 3 pieces. And then I've marked the very centre bottom of each one. You want to make sure that they're all cut nice and trimmed nice and square. And then you're going to take your the front of the back, which is your coloured fabric, and that's all nice and square as well, and I've put a little mark here, which is the middle, and then we're going to align all our pieces to that mark. And this is the largest one, so this is panel 3, or pocket 3 should I say, and making sure that everything's nice and square and lined up. You're going to place it over the front of your back. I know that sounds a bit funny, but you'll see in a minute. And then do exactly the same for the others. So that's the second pocket, all pressed. And then I'm just going to line the middle up with my middle there. And you want this edge here to line up with the edge of your block here. And then do exactly the same with the bottom pocket. So that's going to line up the centre to the centre, and this edge to the edge of your blocks there. And by doing it that way, it makes sure that all your blocks are in a nice line. And then when you're happy with that, you're going to put some pins in, and I'm going to actually pin in the blocks, so that's going to hold all those together. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. That one. Okay. And turn this around this way. So that's all nicely lined up. Then I'm going to take the back of the back, which is the piece that you embroidered, and we're going to place this face down, and I've marked the centre of it as well so that I can align it with the rest. And then we're going to place that on top. And this time we can actually pin around the edge. And these two pieces should be exactly the same size. So I'm going to put my pins in that way so that I can stitch over them. Because I pinned on my actual blocks here, I'm not going to risk my pins getting in the way of my stitching. One thing that we do need to do is leave a gap, and it's probably going to be easier to do it up this end because there's only 2 layers of fabric. So I'm going to put 2 pins in close together, and that's going to mark where I'm going to start stitching, and I'm going to leave about hand's width, so about 4 inches, and then do the same again, and that is going to mark where I start and where I stop. So I'm going to carry on pinning around the edge here. I'm going to turn this round. So that's all now ready to stitch. So I'm going to start here, go all the way around and stop here. The next thing you want to do is check your stitching all the way around, both front and back, to make sure that everything has been hemmed. And then you're going to snip off the corners at an angle, taking care not to get too close to your stitching, and that will remove the bulk from the corners for when you turn it. Now I've removed all the pins from both inside and out. I just put my hand inside the opening and pulled all the pins out. That way when you turn it, you're not going to do yourself any mischief. So now all that remains is for us to turn it out the right way. So pull through your corners. And then I like to just push my scissors with the blades closed, just to poke out the corners so that they're nice and neat. Taking care, of course, not to push a hole into your seam. You can use chopstick, anything that you want for this, as long as you don't damage your corners. I'm just going to push that down into the bottom and push them out nice and neatly. Okay, so after you've done that, you're then going to press everything so that it lays nice and neat and all your seams are nice and flat. So that's what I'm going to do now. So once you've pressed all your hoop holder nice and flat, remember to bring this over and press along the top here, because this is the part that's going to sit over the top of your hanger. The next step you've got is to close up your gap here, and I've just whip stitched along there to close it. And then we need to put some cam snaps in so that it will hold this over our coat hanger. So I've counted out my cam snaps and I'm going to put 5 in. I've measured along here. I've decided how far up I want to go and then measured out equal distances between them, and I've just put a point there so that I know where I'm going to create my holes. Now we're going to be putting the button side on here and on the very back, and then the male and female will go on the insides here. So first things first, we need to create the holes for our snaps, and the easiest way is to make the holes at the same time. That way you know that they're going to line up. So take an awl or equally sharp stabby tool. Quite often cam snap tools come with a sharp point, and then you're going to poke your way through. Now it's probably better to do one at a time so that you can align them properly. So I've created my first two holes. There's a hole on the back and there's a hole on the front. Then you're going to take the button with the spike on it and push it through the back, and then take one of the, either the male or the female, and then you're going to place that over the spike. I'm going to turn this around just so that I can see what I'm doing. Take your cam snap tool, oops, and then work it over the top until the button is sitting in the black cup and the male or female is sitting in the silicone part, and then you're just going to squeeze together, and that will seat your snap in place. And then you're going to do the same with this one. So the button side from the front, push it through, and then put the opposite piece, in this case the male, on top. Take your setting tool, push it over the top of the snap so that you've got one part in the black cup, the button part in the black cup, and the other in the silicone, and then squeeze. And that is your snap now set. So we're now going to do the others in exactly the same way. So push through both the front and back pieces. Take one of the buttons, push it through from the back, then I put a female on there, so I'm going to keep all my females on this part and the males on the flap. Push it into place, and then set it. And take your hanger, place it over, undo it up. And that's our hoop hanger complete. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of new videos as soon as they're published. Do pop along to Kreative Kiwi's Facebook group. There's lots of ideas, help and inspiration there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining me. You'll find a link to this design in the video description below, along with lots of other information such as where I get my supplies and some discount codes for you as well.